I don't remember having turkey Twizzlers, but there was some terrible like chips and pizza and things like that. But it was the kind of stuff you go, oh, pizza. I like pizza. Yeah,
Yeah,
it just wasn't really what you'd class as pizza.
I used to call it good shit pizza because it's like really bad quality base, but a really bad quality cheese. But there's something about that crispiness and that mix on a cold school morning that just it just works somehow. Especially if the dinner lady has warmed it up in the microwave. Despite decades of promised educational technology revolutions, most classrooms today look remarkably similar to those from 50 years ago. While smartphones sit in students' pockets, many schools still rely on textbooks, standardized tests, and the same core curriculum. Today, we're exploring why education has been so resistant to change and whether it needs to evolve faster. Welcome to Temporally Scripted. I'm Jack Austin with Adam Garcia, and we're examining what we call the education revolution, or lack thereof. Adam, can you remember those times when your high school head teacher used to confiscate your calculator because you could write the formulas on the inside of it, and now kids are asking ChatGPT to write their essays?
Yeah, I do remember a little bit of that actually, where they'd check what you were taking into exams to make sure there was nothing written on like a ruler or, like you say, on the inside of a calculator case or something like that. Um, but now it's insane. There must be so many amazing ways to cheat.
Yeah, this is it. It's come on a long way from using your compass to scrape a few half formulas into the side of the calculator case. That's for strong.
I remember in exams, some people would have like different things written on their arms and things like that, just like in really small writing. Um, yeah, those days are gone, I guess. And if you've got any kind of access to ChatGPT, that's you passing the exam
Yeah, definitely. I think as
for
well
sure.
today, yeah, totally. So today we're going to explore a bit more about whether we think students are being prepared for tomorrow's challenges and really how technology is going to change that learning experience. And if we should be looking for alternative education models now, because things are changing so much and we're looking at these century old at least systems in most countries across the world at this stage. So we're going to look into that. We're also going to look at the alternative approaches that are working in some areas, homeschooling being one of those, and look ahead to whether or not we're even going to need education in the coming decades, particularly with what's coming with AI and robotics and everything else. So yeah, it's an interesting one. And I guess even if we look at what it was like when we started at school, so if I scale myself back to a 4-year-old me in a freezing cold east of England, Lincolnshire classroom, I remember we had one BBC computer in the whole school.
Yeah, I remember those. Did you have the game called Pob? And it was like this little dude, and you type something in like Pob can pop, and all of a sudden go, or Pob can jump, and things like that.
Yeah, we did, and it was also those random, like bigger than floppy disk discs. Do you remember those?
I think ours were all, uh, yeah, so not like is it 3.5 inch ones of like the really big ones?
Yeah, yeah, like really big floppy disks, like this size, and the computer literally had the old-fashioned BBC logo on the front of it.
Yeah, yeah.
BBC is in the broadcasting in company from the UK. Everybody who's listening from elsewhere, not the other type of BBC that you find in Adam's search history. Um,
Speaking of which, don't forget to tune in for our OnlyFans episode next week.
but yeah, so even at that stage, I remember we had one or two computers. Actually, one of the games that was on the slightly better computer was like a global domination game, like an online, or not online, on computer version of Risk.
It sounds like you're learning the right things.
Yeah,
Learn
yeah.
how to
So
grow to be Napoleon or something like that.
yeah, absolutely. And then as I left school and progressed through the years, and we're similar in age. I remember us having a computer lab when I was sort of 13, 12 or 13, and I believe in our ages we even saw the movement from a blackboard to a whiteboard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when I was in like sixth form college, that's when I first saw a whiteboard. Before then, it was still blackboards at school. Um, but it's funny. So you say about a computer lab and things like that. It's funny how probably like 5 years difference, it would still be the same computers in that computer lab. Whereas now the difference of 5 years would be astronomical. Whereas back then it's like, oh, well, this is what computers are like. And they'll be pretty much the same in 5 years.
Yeah, yeah. The
Slightly.
progression was ridiculously slow in comparison to what we've got today. I think I remember when my brother first bought a 2 or 3 thousand pound PC, and it was because it had like a 400 megahertz performance on it, which is
Yeah.
quite special. I remember playing Roland Garros tennis on it. But then, like back to classrooms, as I was leaving school, they just started to have interactive whiteboards. And I guess the point that I'm making here is there was a movement in technology in schools in the 20 or 18 years that I attended school and that you attended school.
Mhm.
But in terms of the methods and the way that people are taught,
Yeah. Just slightly different, more fancier ways of teaching the same old tired rubbish that teaches you how to work in a factory in the 1800s.
basically, yeah, and the food in the canteen being, pretty similar. Obviously, we grew up through a
Some
time.
of it tasted like it was made in the 1800s, like
Yeah, and
literally been preserved for all these years.
we were the turkey Twizzler generation, you know.
I don't remember having turkey Twizzlers, but there was some terrible like chips and pizza and things like that. But it was the kind of stuff you go, oh, pizza. I like pizza. Yeah,
Yeah,
it just wasn't really what you'd class as pizza.
I used to call it good shit pizza because it's like really bad quality base, but a really bad quality cheese. But there's something about that crispiness and that mix on a cold school morning that just it just works somehow. Especially if the dinner lady has warmed it up in the microwave. And it's got that slightly the capability of getting scolded by the tomato on top is a real risk that most children have to go through on a daily basis in the UK.
Well, it makes you a strong adult. It sets you up for life, for life's adversities. That's why we do it. It's quite a good system, really. It's meticulously well planned out.
Yeah, and you touched on something there that is obviously why education started, because before that, children used to work in the fields with the adults, right? Particularly, well, the vast majority of the population would have been working in fields. And I know in Victorian times, obviously, the children were very useful because they had small hands and small bodies, which were ideal for crawling inside industrial machinery and cleaning them out, right? So before we had an education system as such, the children would be doing that kind of work. And education was then designed to create these factory workers, which is why you get used to eating at 12 and having your breakfast before you go, and then eating another meal in the evening when you're finished.
Yeah, and it's all just yeah, to mold for the students into that way of thinking, that routine, and how to teach people how to become employees.
Yeah, precisely. So you get used to that feeling of it being a Monday to Friday. When the bell goes off, you do what you're told and essentially learn how to conform to the system that suits the government. But I guess the question is, does that still suit the government?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's so many roads we can go down because it's, for one thing, maybe whatever you teach at school now, a good percentage of it won't be relevant in a few years' time. In 10, 15 years' time, whatever you could be learning at school, it might have just completely changed because of AI's place in the workplace and things like that. It could just be completely different. And you could be learning so much like irrelevant stuff where your time could be better spent learning something else. But what that would be, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, the way that you are taught and the things that you learn aren't necessarily that valuable anyway.
Hmm.
As someone who remembers my education and did spend some time at university despite not graduating, the nightclubs and the nightlife in Nottingham was far too good for focusing on
Yeah, same
things
here.
such as education. Um, but I can't think of anything that I learned that I've been able to apply to my life.
I mean, even if we take that outside of schools into university, in the STEM subjects, you're going to learn things that you are going to use over and over again in your job. Say, if you're learning medicine or engineering or something like that, those skills that you learn, you will use throughout your career. But then when it's kind of like the humanities kind of side of it, you're learning something that then later you'll go and get some job in an office that says degree required, but you'll never use what you learned whatsoever, which is
Yeah,
kind of crazy.
yeah, and I guess for me, I don't believe you really learn how to do anything until you're doing it for real.
Yeah.
Like the theory behind stuff, of course, right? You need to know how to read, how to write, how to do maths to a probably the level of like a 12 or 13-year-old for most things, right? I would say that
Hmm.
that kind of level of knowledge is required, but that can be learned quite quickly. And then anything else outside of that needs to be picked up in life. And as someone who works, I have my own business, as you know, and all of the skills around marketing, around sales, around having conversations with people, how to be persuasive, how to tell stories, how to talk without taking too many breaks or gaps, how to present yourself. These things are not really taught in school. And not only that, they're not even tested for.
Yeah, completely. Um, I mean, there's that, and also, well, there's a whole range of things that we just don't learn in school that would be really useful. Various elements of psychology, um, business, banking, finance, uh, sort of mental well-being, just all kinds of things that would actually be practical tools for life that maybe there should be a little bit more emphasis on, rather than just, can you learn how to figure out these equations? Can you memorize this piece of text? And it's like a weird kind of intelligence test, but one that's not really creative, or maybe not even practical to the real world. Um, and like you said, from your example, everything that you've done in business, you didn't learn at school. There might have been, like, I guess there'll be some basic math that you do here or there that you probably did learn, but there isn't a great deal of things where you're like, oh yeah, well, I had this great teacher in like year 9 or something, taught us all about how to communicate with people and how to ask for things properly or something like that. It's like it didn't happen. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like even the basic side of it, which is the routine, because I'm a huge believer in the power of routine and waking up at the same time every day and following a pattern for how your days go. And you would think that school helps you to learn that. But for me, if anything, it made me rebel against that. Like if I look back to waking up on a cold morning, which is the vast majority of the school year in the UK, and being forced to eat as soon as I woke up, and then being tired, getting dressed, putting a uniform on, sitting on a bus with loads of other kids, driving 20 minutes on that bus to a school, getting off it, going and sitting in an assembly where they would give us announcements about stuff that nobody needs to know or cares about before putting you through a series of different lessons where they teach you the theory behind various things without actually showing you any of the practical application. I don't really see how it prepared me for that. If anything, it made me rebel against routine and think that it was something that isn't desirable and isn't useful. And I was so sick of it by the time I left education or even got to university that I would rather not have any routine whatsoever, which has held me back in my life rather than move me forward, to be honest.
Yeah, I can see that, and I would say the same is true for me in many ways, because you just get so sick of that thing that seems like nonsense. Um, and also, I would imagine that a lot of kids that are being diagnosed with like ADHD and things like that, and the doctors, oh well, he won't pay attention in class. He just keeps acting out. He seems bored all the time. Keeps playing up, and it's like, of course he is. You're trying to force feed him garbage, and he can't take it. He just wants to be a kid and like learn things, play, do fun stuff, not be in this kind of mad military style learning center that stifles creativity, and I I would argue in some ways kind of takes away some of the important aspects of childhood and part of that journey.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. And I think for us, it's we were probably a bit luckier than people are today because at least when we were kids, your parents would still be happy with you going and playing outside and messing around with your friends in the village or in the town that you lived in and going to the local park or playing fields or whatever it was where you grew up. We've all got these memories of afternoons that seemed like they lasted forever in the sunshine where you're out playing with your mates. But because of the way the media is now, and people are generally scared of something happening to their children, whether it be there's pedophiles everywhere, there's terrorists everywhere, there's you name it. Kids
mhm.
are generally kept inside a lot now. So they spend all day in this school, in this schooling situation where they're wrapped up, told to focus on this teacher talking about loads of things that they don't see as relevant, and then they are at home sat in front of phones, computer screens, televisions, and not allowed to go out and experience anything at the same time. And I think those two things together definitely take away a lot of the essence of childhood and what's important for children to do to learn to be people, really, to be fulfilled people.
Yeah, sure. And so it's almost like there's no escape from it because you either have school or you have out of school with TV, video games, and social media, and just never really going out because the world seems like too much of a dangerous place. Um, Whereas, like, I remember being a kid and I'd go for like bike rides with my friends and things like that, and we'd go miles and miles through like the woods and different places, and everything seemed kind of safe. Um, I mean, it turned out it wasn't because one guy that I knew when I was a kid, he got murdered by this pedophile that lived around the corner, uh, which is pretty crazy, actually. Um, yeah, so it's like I guess everything wasn't completely safe then, but I think it was probably still safer than it is now, and the rates of that kind of thing were really low back in those days.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure it was necessarily safer, but I think it's just something that is part of life. You can't stop people experiencing life. It's at what cost? So of all the people that you know growing up and that you spent time with. There is this example of this kid who obviously tragically got murdered and whatever else by this pedophile. And that's terrible. But does that mean that you keep in all children and try and avoid these things happening again? Because they'll happen anyway, and probably more likely to happen by, Uncle Tony and his brown slip-ons while you're locked in the house. I don't have an Uncle Tony, and anybody that says I'm sorry, I'm sure your Uncle Tony
is quite a nice man.
He's a lovely gentleman, and yeah, his brown slip-ons there. And if you wear brown slip-ons, I'm not saying you're a paedophile either. Just for the record, there's a higher chance, I'm sure. But
what is it? Statistically significant?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's statistically significant, and I'm not suggesting that the police start stopping and searching people with brown slip-ons to, check their internet history. But you get the point. It's like, even when my dad told me this story, right? So when he was a kid, he lived in Bradford, and one weekend he was a bit bored, so he decided that he was going to go and see his uncle. He was uncle story again. This is not going where you think it's going. But he decided that he was going to go and see his uncle for a couple of days, and his uncle lived in Wales. So my dad, at 9 years old, hitchhiked to Wales.
Whoa.
Right?
That would not happen today.
No. And when he got there, it was nighttime, so there was nowhere to go, but he knew that his uncle was a police officer, so he went to the local police station, and the police took him in, asked him who he was, and they let him sleep in one of the police cells for the night until his uncle came in for his shift the day after, and he was reconnected with a family member. Now, bear in mind that this would have been at some point in the 1950s, so there's no mobile phones. No, probably not many public telephones. Phoning people likely involved going through some kind of, what do they call it? Like a routing, like a
we call the operator and say, hello, directory inquiries or whatever.
9467, but I'm going to put you, whatever it is, right? Yeah. And so off he went, and he got there fine, and he came back without any problems. Now, that just wouldn't happen today. And is that because it's more dangerous, or is it because we have so much news that people are scared of it? And we're going way off topic here, but I think a lot of it is related to what it's like having a childhood and having to go to what education systems are today.
I think it's one of those things. It's difficult with how we perceive the world. So if you ask most people, if you ask them, are more people dying from natural disasters today than they did in the past, they would say yes, because it's reported a lot more. But the actual truth is less people are dying from natural disasters today than ever, because we have better hospitals, better emergency services, and better preventions and forecasting of these things. So I don't know if some of that is true with how we think the world is more dangerous around us to let kids go out, because there will be a little bit of that, and we maybe perceive it as more dangerous than it is. But I think it probably is a lot more dangerous than it was, definitely when we were kids, and definitely when, like, your dad was a kid and hitchhiking his way across the UK. And I think those dangers would be really quite high, especially in some areas and in cities and things like that, where I don't know, it's like there's some dangerous folk out there.
Yeah, but again, I'm not sure. I guess people did have more standards of decency. Of course, I think things are a little bit more dangerous, but I think a lot of it is just what's reported. Like, no, going on Jim will fix it in the 1970s was still dangerous, but nobody reported it.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like more stuff went on.
Yeah, I think there's been quite a few cases in the UK recently, though, where things like that have been going on like quite a mass sort of scale. Um, and I would think it's way more dangerous now. I mean, also you have more people, so you have more of those weirdos. Whereas
Yeah,
like the population when we were kids or back in the 1950s or whatever was a lot less. So if like one in X amount of people is some dodgy character, well, now you have double the amount of people, so there's twice as many.
yeah, and I guess concentrated. But so let's bring it back a little bit because we've talked here a lot about the experience of childhood and we've gone into things being dangerous and why maybe kids don't have as much of a release from rigidity and structure when they're not at school, which is
Hmm.
the point of what we were saying, right? But in the past, you had a release because you could go out and be a kid in the evenings and weekends. And there's probably less of that now because of technology. But bringing it back to education. So, university, we both went,
Well, kinda.
paid for it. And I think when I was at university, it was £1,500 for a year, subsidized. And I remember it went up a year after I started to 3,000, which at the time seemed like a lot of money.
Because it
And
was.
because it was, and that is, of course, subsidized because the way most universities in the UK make their money is by charging foreign students
Hmm.
astronomical amounts per year, like 30 to 60,000 pounds a year. And I believe now it's 9,000 pounds a year to do university in the
Yeah.
UK. So for a
Plus, then
3 year
you
course,
Yeah, plus you want to get like a maintenance loan and things like that. You might get a student overdraft, various other things that land you in even more debt.
yeah. So are universities still worth the price? Or is it becoming more of an outdated status symbol?
I don't think it's really worth the money. I don't know. I mean, I guess really with a degree, you use it to get your first job, and then once you've got your first job, that's your reference point from there. And that's really, like I said before, apart from the sort of like STEM kind of subjects, it's like a lot of the time it's just so you can get your first job. And you can say, oh, well, I've already worked for this agency or whatever company, and then you can use that in the future to progress your career. And it's only for that one thing, and that thing comes with a price tag of like 40K or something like that for the average student, which is kind of nuts. And are you really are you using your time in a valuable way over those 3 years? I'm kind of hoping in the future that employers look less at whether or not people have degrees and class that is so important, especially, I don't know, when you have some like absolutely ludicrous courses or something like that that make no sense. It's like, oh, I spent 3 years doing this. Oh, wicked. That lesbian dance theory or whatever is going to come really come in really handy in my company. I'm definitely taking you on.
Yeah.
It's like it just makes no sense. And I think now as well with technology, we should be maybe we should just be doing it in a way where it becomes cheaper or free just to do a load of different units from various courses to prove that you have the mental capacity to do certain things. And then once you get so many credits, that counts as a degree. I don't know that I think there'd be different ways to do it, especially online. And I don't see why it should cost you £9,000 because you would think to put a load of lectures together and some kind of interactive classes where it's could be AI or even simpler things that are just testing what you know, and then something else that can check the quality of your work if you're writing essays. That's kind of all you need, and I don't think that would cost a whole lot of money. And you could get some of the best people in the world to make some of the best, very best courses available. And so you'd be giving like the best information to people for free or next to nothing, or
Yeah.
certainly cheaper than like £9,000. And half of this, a lot of people could take a year out and do it in a year, rather than this 3-year thing that lands you £40,000 in debt before you've even started your adult life, really.
Yeah, and I think the argument for it is, as what I think my mum used to tell me, is they used to call it reading for a degree. And the idea is that you can go through a series of things that you have to commit to and get really into detail and depth, even if it's not necessarily that interesting or rewarding, to follow through with the process. And by doing that, you've proven that you are a certain level of intelligence effectively, because you can go through that process of reading all of these things. But that seems like an awfully large amount of time and money to be able to do that. And also, a lot of these universities can only sustain themselves because they overcharge foreign students. So, one example I can give, I studied business studies at university, which is ridiculous for a whole other reason, in the people that decide to lecture on business are clearly terrible at business, because otherwise, why would you take such a low-paid job?
Yeah. Why are you not on your yacht kind of cruising around the Mediterranean instead you're in
Exactly.
some
Oh,
like dingy lecture hall in Nottingham?
yeah. Oh, no. Well, I know business theory and I'm passionate about business theory. Or like people who teach business finance, for example. Like, what it's literally the driest and most boring subject. Then again, a lot of these people did subsidize themselves by, when it's the start of the year and they say, oh, these are our recommended reading for the course. This textbook is only £40, and oh, it's written by me. So
It's strange coincidence,
the
but
textbook, amazing. Oh, and there's two textbooks for this year, and this one's written by me and my friend who used to be the lecturer for this subject and has now moved on
I
to
mean
another research
that
position.
that brings up another interesting thing with university, where a lot of people just get stuck into academia, and so they'll go from being a student to then do masters, PhD, start lecturing, but never actually leave the education or university background, and never actually really venture into the outside world of knowing anything different, which is also kind of interesting. So the people that are maybe lecturing you about how to run a business or how to be business minded have never had a business, have never really interacted with many businesses other than their publisher and their printer to sell you books. And it's really crazy. Uh,
Which they're allowed to do as well, because they've basically got permission to create the curriculum and the course in any way that they see fit. Now, granted, the degree that I did was known as a sandwich, so that means that you're supposed to go out and do a year in industry in the middle, which is probably the most valuable year that you get. I wouldn't know, because I did my first year once and my second year twice and then dropped out. But it's, yeah, you can see that even they are recognizing that in business you're better off going and getting a job. But in reality, that job is just so that you build a relationship with a company that you can then go and get a job with on their graduate scheme after. And
yeah.
I also worked at Boots in a corporate job without my degree and worked myself through up into decent positions with responsibility. And in one of those such positions, I was given the task of managing three of the grads that came through. So they joined the graduate program. They were all lovely guys. I got on with them really well, but they were useless at business. And obviously, because they'd
Mm.
never done it. And the irony of it is all three of them were paid more than I was at the time, because they'd come through on the graduate scheme, and I was managing them all and teaching them, which didn't bother me because they were good guys. But it just shows you that even the businesses are like paying more for these people that don't know any better than the people who don't have degrees, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it seems really crazy, but I've known various people tell similar stories where they didn't have a degree. Maybe they'd be working in the civil service or something like that. Then, oh, some new guy's joined the team. He's got a degree. He's like in a management role. He's getting paid loads of money, has no idea what is going on or how anything works or seems to do anything that makes sense. And I've heard loads of stories like that. And just, I guess that's down to the hiring practices of various companies and things like that. And maybe there'll be some, and there probably is some kind of evolution away from that, I would think, in many ways.
Yeah, I think part of it is time, because the truth is, generally, people who have graduated university, if you take a subsection, are going to be more intelligent and therefore more likely to succeed in corporate roles, in business roles, in the kind of roles that people go for after graduating from university. Because one such example is car hire companies, right? Car hire companies in the UK are one of the biggest employers of graduates once they finish their degrees.
I didn't know that.
Right now, there's no reason that you need a degree to work in a car hire company, but for them, it must just be that they know they get a higher percentage of people that are employable if they just say, if you're not a graduate, you can't work here.
Yeah. Well, it's just like all the other tests that we do through school, whether that's, I think, oh, what is it we do in secondary school? You do like SATs, and then later you do GCSEs, and then after that go to sixth form, do A levels, and then the degree is just like a continuation of that, really. And it's just to sort of prove that you're of a certain intelligence, able to do certain tasks. Also, maybe that you can commit to something and work hard enough on something for X amount of time to produce a dissertation or whatever else it may be. And so we just look at that as like a blanket thing, go, yeah, that's great, wicked. Is that the best candidate? Probably not. But again, it's like, it's just how the system is structured. And unless we come up with something better for the whole thing that is a bit more, that allows more opportunity, maybe more creativity or something else. I don't know. It doesn't seem like the setup that we have is the right one. I don't particularly have any answers as
Of
to,
what's better.
yeah, but I know there's a lot of things that just seem to be wrong with the current system. And a lot of it as well, it just seems to really stifle creativity. And it's just getting everyone to do this uniform, standardized, really mundane and boring stuff that it's just this constant like churning out of, yeah, I don't know. And it's not encouraging that creativity and spark. And I mean, it's like when you're saying about business and things like that, really a lot of that, yeah, you have to know how to manage a business, some of the boring things to do with accounts and different laws and things, but a huge part of that should be like a creative entrepreneurial kind of thing where you're coming up with ideas rather than it being this really like watching paint dry kind of experience.
I totally agree with you, and I feel like part of that is deliberate to serve the world that's been created. But I also feel like the world that we're going into is not the same as that. I think we will come on to the future of technology and integration of that in education and how things are maybe changing, particularly with the younger generation in Generation Alpha and the younger side of Gen Z. But I guess the last point on universities before we move on is I think there's a difference in the university. So you said already, if you are going to be a doctor or a surgeon or whatever, an architect, then sure, you need to go and learn all these skills in university and you need to get to that point where you know all of these things. At least for now, until robotics and AI gets to a level where it can do that stuff better. But also, it's about connections. So did you go to Nottingham Trent?
I did, yeah.
And I went to Nottingham Trent University. And I guess if I pulled up now, like the famous people to come out of Nottingham Trent University, which is
There'll probably be a picture of us too. This is the proudest moment of our university.
Yeah, you've got people like Richard Bacon.
Right. Okay.
Um,
Astounding intellect.
Astounding intellect, and I think Blue Peter presenter and cocaine addict.
Yeah. Disgraced Blue Peter
Disgraced Blue
presenter.
Peter presenter. Yeah, you've got Chuka Umunna, the politician whose name I've probably pronounced incorrectly and offended various people, but who cares? Nobody likes politicians anyway. And I'm looking at the rest of these people, and I don't recognize any of them. Paul K, don't know who that is.
No idea.
Yeah, so there's various people here. So this is the notable alumni of Nottingham Trent University. So the people that you get to rub shoulders with there. Now, if I
Yeah.
change that to people to come out of Stanford University,
Or how about just Nottingham University?
yeah, even nicer comparison, because obviously for those of you that don't know, not universities like Nottingham Trent are not really universities. There used to be something called a polytechnic, which is like a technical college, lower level university for people that aren't academic. And then there are universities that are called the University of and the City. Okay. So the University of and the City are generally the higher quality ones. You are going to laugh though, because I think maybe Nottingham's a bad choice in general. But out of the list of notable people from the University of Nottingham, we have Jake Bugg,
Okay.
who is a songwriter who got famous when he was about 16. Paul Smith, who people will know of, like the
Oh,
fashion
okay.
designer, very famous Nottingham person and well known. Carl Froch, the boxer. So I'm not sure how much that he came up with. And Mr. Jam, the disc jockey from Radio One. So yeah,
Right, that's surprising. I thought it would be some more interesting things on there. Is that
no, John Boots that of Boots the Chemist. But yeah, not so many. But if we looked at, say, Cambridge, just to keep it British, right? Then you're going to get like Stephen Hawking, Charles Darwin, Alan Turing, Isaac Newton, Richard Attenborough, right? It's Warwick
is it
Davies. It's a bit of a different list of people, right? So if you paid the money to
yeah.
attend £9,000 a year, and your peers were Stephen Hawking and Charles Darwin, obviously not at the same time. This is not some kind of futuristic time travel university where you get to rub shoulders with everyone. But I was going to make a terrible joke there about Stephen Hawking and rubbing shoulders, but I've been moved away from that.
Nice.
It's a very different alumni and a different quality of person that you're going to be around. And I think to bring it to a more modern way, if we look at the famous people to come out of Stanford, it's like all kinds of people, JFK, Larry Page, Tiger Woods. I mean, if I was a single man, a night out with Tiger Woods, it'd be great fun.
Yes, why not? Go and play crazy golf somewhere or something like that.
Yeah, finish it with a gangbang or something, or whatever else he's up to. But yeah,
Allegedly.
you get my point, right? Is if you're paying £9,000 a year and you get to make lots of really good connections.
Yeah, and I think it's the connections that are really important, but also just kind of the content as well. So I remember when I was at Nottingham Trent, I was doing international relations and global politics. And I had a friend who, one of his friends was doing the same course, but at LSE. And he was telling me about how many hours of work his friend was doing when he was doing the same course at LSE. And it was just like astounding. It was like a full-time job kind of thing. Whereas mine, I think it was like, you might have 2 hours a day or something like that, or 4 hours a day here, but it was like really sparse and not really a lot going on. And it's still all the same. You're still paying like 9,000 whatever, but you're just learning so much more for your money at one place compared to the other. And it seems a bit unfair because it it stops or hinders the potential that a lot of people have, because you just, if you're going to a university and you're doing like 10, 15 hours a week, you're learning a hell of a lot less than someone who's doing 30 something hours a week with better teachers and a much a much superior course in terms of how it's structured and its content and everything else. And it just seems like a really unfair disparity when it costs you the same amount of money.
Yeah, yeah. I think so. When my dad was at the age of going to university, only 6% of the population went.
Hmm.
And when I don't know what the stat is now, but when I was at university, it was closer to 50%.
Yeah.
And part of that, I guess, is just a lack of jobs to put people into as well. It's like, let's keep people in the education systems and let's use it as a way to drive revenue and finance, and people not being part of the unemployment statistics.
Yeah, it's what probably all of those things. In some ways, you kind of, it's a good way to kind of massage statistics and go, okay, well, yeah, well, it's all these people in university, so that makes it better or look better on paper because you have less unemployed. But at the same time, it's like, if you want to go to university, you pretty much have no choice other than to get this student loan. At some point your money's going to run out, so you're going to go to the bank, maybe multiple banks, and ask for like a student account with an overdraft, and it's just all of a sudden creating all this money out of thin
Guilty.
air. Same here. But it's like it's just creating all of this money out of thin air because it's just creating debt. And so one person might rack up, I don't know, of £40,000 worth of debt or something like that, but times that by all of the students in the country, and that's just so much that someone's making that money somewhere. Um, and
Yeah,
it just seems like a kind of a bit of a trick, really, and
yeah. Well,
it feels like you've been missold something.
yeah, and I believe that the student loans financer or underwriter, I think is the word for it in the UK, is the Rothschild Bank.
Interesting.
So take from that whatever you will. You know, I'm not suggesting that there are lizard people. By the way, for those of you that as soon as I mention Rothschilds are going to run down the track, if in fact there
However,
is.
I am suggesting that there are shape-shifting lizard people. They do exist.
In fact, we're not just suggesting; it's a fact. We know. So, what about the future? Obviously, it's well documented that modern companies dealing with technology, such as Google and Tesla, no longer require degrees. There's all this shift in terms of AI giving you access to an unlimited amount of learning at your fingertips for a very, very low price. There's generally a shift from people even wanting to work in offices, particularly in younger generations. People are choosing to go out on their own and create their own businesses and figure out their own route into the world and into making money. So what does this mean for the education system?
I really don't know, but I think it needs to change somewhat. Well, because I mean, in so many subjects, I guess I don't know. I'm getting lost here because it's completely impossible to know what will happen and how AI will affect things. But in some ways, what's the point in going to university and becoming an expert in some area of history when AI can tell you anything you want to know about that in seconds? What's the point of like being so educated in different things when we have something that can reason far better? That it just seems like it's almost a waste of time in some ways. I mean, it's always amazing to learn things and understand how things work. But with some things, is that really necessary? because we all have a phone now. Many of us have ChatGPT or Grok or whatever else, and that's like having an expert with you. And so I think we need to have some level where we kind of learning things and learning how systems work, but then learning how to utilize the power of the technology that we have.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what does it mean for the sale of tweed jackets with leather patches on the elbows? I mean, this is the real deep question of it all. But joking aside, I think you've scratched the surface of the answer, and I know the answer, by the way. So I have the solution to the education system problem, and it's one that things have changed a lot over the last 120, 130 years since education has been in its format that it's in, and it's not really progressed, changed, evolved. I mean, some of the textbooks I was using in primary school were still there in the 1950s. So I know that the BBC computer wasn't, but anyway,
Hmm.
for me, it's about teaching the skills around personal development. Like that's the key to the future of education. So teaching people how to believe in themselves and what they're doing, which sounds really wishy-washy, but let me dig down into that point. So giving people the capability to self-regulate, giving people the capability to know that what they're doing and who they are is enough, helping them develop a regime of what personal development is about. What are the skills to become a better version of yourself physically, emotionally, and mentally? And how do you do that? Because there's a skill involved with these things. Like on the emotional side of things, it's meditation, it's mindfulness, it's the ability to reflect and contemplate your place in the world and in existence. There's obviously the side of things with developing your capability physically and making sure that you've got, like, I actually think PE and physical education at school is one of the things that is vitally important and
Yeah,
should be
sure.
continued. Like my fitness was great when I was at school, even though I wasn't that into that sort of vibe, as we mentioned, I think, on a previous episode. So I think this is what needs to be focused on: is how do you make people rounded humans that are able to be happy and continue down whatever path they decide to choose in their lives, because automation's coming, AI is coming, and it's going to replace jobs as these technological changes always do. But people need to be ready to do whatever's going to come next, right? I
I I was going to say, I guess at the same time, historically, when new technologies have arrived, they've taken a lot of jobs, but also created a lot of jobs at the same time. But I guess that's kind of debatable with AI as to how many jobs it will create, because it's hard to see a world where that could happen. It's
yeah,
it's easy
yeah.
to see a world where millions and millions of jobs just disappear. Um,
But I think people have felt like that before. Like if you look at before the internet, there wasn't email marketing specialists. There was no SEO people. There was no social media marketers.
no
There's
podcasters.
no podcasters. Exactly. What would we do with our time?
Yeah.
So I think teaching people to be adaptable and to be able to react to the changes that are happening in society and in the world, it's that that's important, because that will address the massive issues we have with mental illness and all of these other things that affect the world. There's a level of understanding that needs to be found, and I think for me, that's what I believe will happen when AI takes away a lot of that process of learning and thinking and trying to figure out why, right? The why will become less about why is the universe like this? How does this work? And more about the spirituality and
Hmm.
what does it mean to be a human? Why is existence there? And I think humans need to be ready for that.
Yeah. Um, it's going to be such a big shift. And I think, yeah, I think in some ways, what we need to do is create something. I was thinking the other day how a lot of the things that I became interested in as an adult were things that I really hated at school. You know, things like whether it's like the use of English as a language or literature or poetry or even music lessons at school. I was like, this is what, you know, but it's like, we need to find a way to make all of these things interesting. And it's the same with science. It's like you watch, I don't know, like a Brian Cox documentary or something like that about the universe. And it's like, wow, this is fascinating. It seemed so boring at school. And it's just, we need to get rid of this like stifling sort of atmosphere and make it where kids kind of go, oh, wicked, got English literature tomorrow. That'll be amazing, you know, or whatever
Yeah.
else, and sort of have some kind of excitement, but at the same time, sort of work on things that build our sort of psyche, to, like you're saying, in terms of personal development, to just be that something more and have like a better understanding of the world. Um, a lot of the most important things that I found in life that hit me came from reading different bits of Buddhism or different philosophical ideas, going like, oh wow, that's so cool. But I just never even got taught these things in school.
Yeah, and I feel there's a bit of that. But have you ever heard the phrase "education is wasted on the young"?
I haven't, but I can see why that would work.
Yeah, so I think there's a little bit of that in there as well. It's really, should you even be educated at anything other than how to be in a community and in a group of people until you're like 11 or 12? You're
Mm.
literally playing, building things, making projects, discovering stuff. Like there's a really cool TED talk with this kid who was homeschooled, and he's super into snowboarding. So he starts focusing on building this snowboarding accessory company or snowboards or something like that anyway. And then he talks about how once he'd got that idea, then he had to learn about design because he wants to design his snowboards. So he starts looking
Yeah,
into
so
design.
every step of the way he has to learn something new. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, so a very personalized and individualized educational process. And I think that's where we move away from traditional teachers and it being more about mentors. And I think the reality of that happening without technology is close to zero because you can't have enough mentors for everybody, right? It's not possible. But with technology, I think it gives us some hope that you can have an individual mentor that knows enough about you as a person that they can engage you, keep you focused, and keep you moving forward on things. Similar to how apps gamify the learning process, which is, to be honest, not quite there because it's taking advantage of people's need for dopamine. But
Mm.
it gives us an insight into what could be when you can have a mentor that's virtual reality or augmented reality, specifically teaching you and asking you questions and figuring out your psyche, your personality type, what makes you click. Because it's something that is going to have to be another episode because we're going to run out of time. But I wanted to talk about entrepreneurship and businesses. Like most business owners have got some form of ADHD
Mm.
generally, right? Which is weird because the traditional education system doesn't cater to those people, right? It doesn't cater to people with ADHD or on that spectrum. So again, it just shows you that we're stifling a level of creativity and innovation in the fact that most people I know in the digital space that are business owners didn't do very well at school and didn't enjoy the process of school. And yet they are the people that are creating the most things in the online world now.
Yeah, and you hear of many examples of that where it's various billionaire entrepreneurs that dropped out of high school or dropped out of uni or something like that, or like you say, at the time, people are, oh, he's got ADHD or whatever. Never, and teachers saying at school, oh, this guy won't amount to much. He's got no hope. Gets out of the school environment and all of a sudden flourishes and does really well.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think there's tons to unpack here, Adam, and I think we could carry on talking for another hour about education, but it's something that we'll certainly revisit, particularly the future and what's to come in the future of education. But for today, I reckon we've just about used up people's attention span on this topic. What do you think?
I think people have very short attention spans, and I think people clicked off about 2.5 minutes in.
Yeah, I would say looking at our statistics on YouTube, that's probably the case. So, just to wrap us up today, whether you're a student at the moment going through the education system, a parent, or an educator, or even just someone who cares about what's going to happen in the future, the education revolution or lack thereof affects us all. These institutions that shaped previous generations are being fundamentally reimagined by society, and whether or not they can catch up and continue to exist in the future is still open to question. But what we need to look at with technology is the incredible new possibilities that it opens up, even though that core mission remains the same, which is, of course, to prepare young minds to thrive in an uncertain world. So, looking ahead to next week, I was going to say dipping into. We're going to look at the OnlyFans economy. Don't worry, it's not me and Adam starting our OnlyFans channel. We're still going to give this a bit more of a chance to see if we get more views before that. So we're going to look into digital intimacy and the hidden economics and dark side of OnlyFans. We'll be exploring the platform's explosive growth, these words, examine the stark reality behind the marketing, and discuss the psychological and societal implications of this digital intimacy marketplace. So until then, please let us know what your education experience was like. Do you think that technology is improving or hindering learning, or is it just staying exactly the same? Share your thoughts and experiences with us on X at Temporally Scripted or on Instagram. Check out the show notes on our websites for any recommendations of the resources that we used and also the education models and educational technology that's worth exploring. Thank you very much, and we will see you again next week. Goodbye.
Bye.